What if Jon Snow vanished from the wall for a year, only to return wearing another man's face? Arya's deadly gift would turn him into Westeros' most dangerous secret. The snow over Castle Black fell in heavy, silencing sheets, swallowing the sound of boots on stone. Jon's watch brothers thought he was on patrol. In truth, he had already crossed beyond the wall, not in pursuit of wildlings, but in pursuit of his sister. Arya had been waiting, changed colder, eyes shadowed by something he didn't understand. She didn't greet him with an embrace. She greeted him with a question that would decide the shape of his life. Do you want to learn how to kill anyone, anywhere, without them even knowing it's you? He didn't answer right away. The wind tore at his cloak as he searched her face. She wasn't the little girl he remembered. She was sharper now, a blade that had been honed by secrets he couldn't name. This isn't about revenge, she added. It's about survival. And survival means becoming no one. 3 days later, the wall was behind them. The road to Braavos stretched ahead, and Jon had given up his black for the rough leathers of a trader's son. In Braavos, the air smelled of salt and lies. The House of Black and White swallowed him whole. Faces lined the walls, each one a promise, each one a threat. He had thought he knew discipline. The Faceless men taught him he knew nothing. Here's where it gets crazy. Arya didn't go easy on him because they were family. She broke him down night after night, stripping away not just his skill with a sword, but the way he carried himself, the way he thought. She made him forget the name Jon Snow until it tasted strange in his mouth. When he failed to move like the dead, she struck him. When he failed to listen like the living, she made him stand for hours, blindfolded, surrounded by whispers that came from nowhere and everywhere. But then, just as he was beginning to adapt, she gave him his first face. It was a boy's, no older than 16, freckles splashed across the nose, brown eyes that made him unremarkable in any crowd. Your first lesson isn't killing, she said. It's being invisible in plain sight. And it worked. In the crowded markets of Braavos, Jon Snow disappeared. People brushed past him without a glance, never knowing the Stark bastard stood inches away. Wait, what? Just imagine this. Jon Snow, who the entire realm recognizes by that brooding, stark-eyed look, now able to walk through King's Landing and not a soul notice him. Think about how that changes everything. The point of divergence hit the moment Arya whispered her second lesson. You're going to use this to save people, even if it means killing others first. That was the line. That was where the Jon Snow who fought with honor started to fade, replaced by something sharper, deadlier. By the time word of the Bolton cruelty reached Braavos, Jon was ready. Not the Jon who charged across battlefields with sword raised, but the Jon who could walk into a feast, pour Ramsay Bolton's wine, and be gone before the man's heart stopped beating. Arya watched him with something between pride and fear. The North needs ghosts, she said, not kings. And here's where it gets insane. Imagine the political storm if Jon returned to the North not as the brooding Lord Commander, but as a weapon no one could see coming. Lords wouldn't plot against him. Enemies wouldn't see him ride into battle. They'd never even know they'd been targeted until they were already gone. But that kind of power, it comes with a price. And Westeros, it was about to pay it in blood. The North had grown colder in Jon's absence, but not just from winter. Rumors swept the keeps. Bolton men flaying bannermen alive, Karstarks disappearing, and the Manderleys quietly sharpening their knives. In White Harbor, fear sat at the tables like an uninvited guest. Jon came ashore with a face no one recognized, broad-jawed, weathered, and streaked with a salt and pepper beard. He wore the simple leathers of Selsword, and his voice had a rough edge, not the steady northern cadence people knew. No one greeted him by name. No one bowed. That was the point. His first target was a Bolton captain stationed in Barrowton, a man responsible for hanging 3 Stark loyalists and sending their heads north as a warning. Jon didn't ride into town. He walked in at nightfall, carrying a jug of sour wine and a false swagger. The tavern was full of Bolton men, laughter bouncing off the rafters. No one looked twice at him as he poured drinks, let them call him Selsword, let them toss coins at his feet. And then, just like that, the captain was dead, not with a sword, not with a fight, Just a hand on the man's shoulder, a whisper for the Starks, and a small, precise movement with a blade so thin it could vanish in moonlight. Jon left before the man's friends even noticed his face growing pale. By the time they did, Jon was gone, his face already changing in the shadows outside. Okay, pause. Can you even wrap your head around this? In the show, Jon always fought in the open, honor first. But here, he's an unseen storm. This is a nightmare for anyone sitting in a position of power. The first kill wasn't just personal, it was political. Word spread fast, though not about Jon. The whisper spoke of a ghost killing Bolton men from the shadows. Roose Bolton tightened his guard, ordered double watches, and banned all strangers from the keep. That fear was worth more than 1,000 swords. Arya warned him. Every time you take a face, you give up a little more of yourself. Jon didn't answer, but the truth gnawed at him. He told himself he was doing this for the North, for Sansa, for Rickon, if he was still alive. But in the quiet between missions, he started to wonder if he could ever truly come back. His next mission took him south, into territory crawling with Frey banners. Walder Frey had sent gifts to the Boltons, bread, salt, and the memory of the Red Wedding. Jon's plan wasn't to kill the old man. Not yet. It was to make him bleed in ways he didn't expect. He slipped into the twins under the face of a stable hand, a boy with a limp. He cleaned stalls, mucked hay, and listened. The Freys talked freely around him, spitting insults about the Starks like it was nothing. Jon said nothing in return. But on the third night, one of Walder's sons was found hanging from the rafters. No sign of struggle, no note. Just dead, eyes open, mouth frozen in a scream. Wait, what? You see what's happening? Jon's building a legend without a name. The enemy starts looking over their shoulders. They start fearing shadows. And in Game of Thrones, fear is a weapon sharper than Valyrian steel. The point of divergence rippled outward fast. The Boltons and Freys started blaming each other for the killings. Alliances frayed. Secret letters were sent. In Winterfell, Ramsay took the bait and accused the Freys of betrayal, threatening to send his dogs to sniff out the truth. Meanwhile, Jon stood in the crowd of Winterfell's market, a faceless man among dozens, watching his enemies scream orders from the castle walls. No one knew him. No one could touch him. But every heartbeat in his chest reminded him, this wasn't the way of the Starks. This was the way of no one. And in the distance, beyond the politics, beyond the vengeance, the true storm, white, cold, and endless, was still coming. But Jon Snow? He was become the kind of man who could walk into that storm unseen. Winter's grip tightened around the north, but the real chill came from the whispers. The ghosts in the north, they called him now. Bolton soldiers wouldn't travel alone. Frey riders kept to the roads in packs, and every tavern corner seemed to hold a nervous man glancing over his shoulder. Jon knew the danger in becoming a story. Stories inspired loyalty, but they also drew attention. That was the last thing he wanted, until he realized the attention was landing on the wrong people. The Boltons suspected Karstark treachery. The Freys suspected the Manderleys. Little by little, the cracks widened. In White Harbor, Lord Wyman Manderley summoned his most trusted men to a candlelit chamber. Sansa sat beside him, her face calm but her eyes sharp. She had heard the rumors. She knew her brother better than anyone. At least, she thought she did. If it is him, she whispered to Manderley, we can use him. Meanwhile, Arya watched from the shadows of the same room, her face not her own. She had warned Jon about crossing lines, but she saw now how the North bent when the right pressure was applied. Still, there was something in her that didn't trust the way Jon's eyes lingered after a kill. Here's where it gets crazy. Cersei Lannister heard about it, too. Not the name, not Jon Snow, but the pattern. Lannister spies reported Northern lords die in ways too precise to be chance. No witnesses, no sound, no sign of struggle. To Cersei, it was another tool or another threat. Either way, she wanted it in her grasp. Littlefinger, of course, smelled opportunity before anyone else. He arrived in the North draped in polite smiles, bringing support for Sansa. But his eyes tracked the ripples, the paranoia, the shifting alliances, the subtle hints of an unseen player in the game. "A phantom killer, my lady," he told Sansa over wine. "If he can kill for you, he can also kill you." Wait, what? That one sentence changes everything. Because now Sansa isn't sure if she's hunting Jon or protecting him. Jon's next move was bolder. Disguised as a mute sellsword, he entered the Bolton Control Keep at the last hearth. His goal wasn't a lord this time. It was information. He needed to know how Ramsay planned to hold the North when the snows got deeper and the food ran out. He listened from behind doors, carrying trays, scrubbing floors, catching every word Ramsay spat at his bannermen. And that's when he learned something that hit harder than any blade. Ramsay knew about Rickon. Not just that he lived, but that he had him. Jon's heart nearly betrayed him. His grip on the tray tightened until the wood creaked. Arya's voice echoed in his mind. No one has a brother. No one has a name. But Jon Snow had both, and he would burn his own rules before leaving Rickon in Ramsay's hands. He slipped from the keep before dawn, traded his face twice before crossing the first ridge, and made for White Harbor. If he was going to save Rickon, he needed an army, but the North was still fractured, and every lord had his own enemies. Okay, let's be real, this is a tipping point. Up until now, Jon's been the shadow. But now he has to step into the light, without losing the advantage of the dark. Sansa met him first. She didn't flinch when he pulled off the stranger's face, and the brother she thought she'd lost stood before her. She didn't cry, didn't embrace him. She just said, "You've changed." And she was right. His eyes were colder, his words shorter. And when he talked about killing Ramsay, there was no hesitation, no honor, only certainty. The political ripple hit hard. Manderley swore ships. Sansa swore loyalty, and Littlefinger, well, he swore nothing, but he smiled in that way that meant he was already plotting. Somewhere deep in the snowfields, Ramsay Bolton laughed at the idea of ghosts. But soon, the ghost would be standing right in front of him, wearing a face he trusted. Snow hammered the north so hard the air itself felt sharp. Ramsay Bolton's banners still flew from Winterfell's walls, but the Shadow War had already begun. Jon wasn't marching on Winterfell with open banners. He was dismantling it piece by piece from the inside. Before the armies even gathered, Bolton's supply lines started breaking. Convoys vanished on the King's Road. The men guarding the eastern watchtower were found frozen, their food gone, their faces calm as if they died in their sleep. No one saw the killer. No one saw anything at all. And here's where it gets wild. Ramsay didn't rage. He smiled. He liked the idea of an unseen hunter, because it meant fear was already seeping into his men. But what Ramsay didn't know was that the hunter wasn't just killing. He was replacing. One of his trusted scouts was no longer the same man who'd ridden out that morning. That scout was Jon Snow. As a Bolton man, Jon walked straight into Winterfell's heart. He memorized guard rotations, supply counts, hidden passageways. He learned the kennel schedule. He listened to Ramsay speak about Rickon, as if the boy were a pet to be toyed with before slaughter. Every word burned. But Jon didn't break cover. Not yet. Sansa was in the field, rallying banners under the promise of Stark vengeance. The Manderleys brought ships, the Hornwoods pledged spears, and even some Karstarks, secretly disillusioned with Bolton rule, began sending messages to join. The ghosts in the north, legend worked better than any raven letter. People wanted to fight for someone who could make monsters disappear. Meanwhile, Arya was torn. She had taught Jon the Faceless way, but she saw now what it cost him. He wasn't no one. He was still Jon Snow, only now his rage had precision. Wait, what? Think about that for a second. This isn't the Jon from the original battle. That Jon was outnumbered, desperate, charging into an open field. This Jon is setting the board before the game even starts. The turning point came when Jon, still wearing a borrowed face, slipped into the kennels and freed Rickon in the dead of night. But instead of taking him straight to safety, Jon made sure Ramsay knew Rickon was gone. It was bait to drag Ramsay out from behind Winterfell's walls. Ramsay took it, sending half his best men south to hunt the boy, thinking the Starks were on the run again. That was when Jon struck. His forces, already positioned from days of quiet movement, fell on the smaller Bolton garrison with brutal efficiency. Littlefinger arrived late to the field, just in time to see that the battle was already nearly over. Winterfell's gates were breached from within, opened by a man Ramsay had trusted hours before. A man who wasn't really that man at all. Ramsay fought like a cornered wolf. But the end wasn't a grand duel in the mud. Jon took his face off in front of him. That moment, Ramsay, seeing the man he thought was his own scout transform into brother of the boy he hunted, was the only time he looked afraid. Jon didn't let him talk, didn't let him gloat, just a knife, quick and silent, the way Arya taught him. Ramsay Bolton died without an audience, without glory, without even his own name on his lips. The aftermath was stranger than the battle. Lords gathered in Winterfell's great hall, staring at the man who brought them victory without a single open charge. They called him Stark. They called him king. But in his mind, Jon still heard Arya's voice. No one has a crown. And far beyond the wall, something colder than any Bolton still waited, and it didn't care whose face Jon Snow wore. The North was his now. At least, that's what the Lord said. But Jon Snow knew the truth. The North didn't belong to him. It belonged to the legend. The ghost in the North had won Winterfell, freed Rickon, and buried Ramsay without a scream. But legends were fragile things. One wrong move, and they shattered. Sansa stood beside him in the great hall, wearing the Stark furs like armor. She spoke for unity, for strength, for banners held high against the coming winter. Jon said less. Words were for kings. Shadows didn't need them. But whispers reached him even before the banners were sewn back onto poles. Some Karstarks claimed he'd struck like a coward. The Umbers said he fought like an assassin, not a Stark. Even in victory, doubt crept in, and when a raven arrived from the wall, its message sealed in black wax, Jon felt the weight of another war pressing down. The dead were marching. Here's where it gets insane. Jon's faceless training gave him something no Northern Lord had. The ability to walk among the dead without them noticing. Or so Arya claimed. She'd seen it once in Bravos. A faceless man wearing the skin of one already gone, moving freely among corpses until his strike came. It was dangerous, untested, but Jon didn't hesitate. The plan was reckless. He would ride north with only a handful of trusted warriors, leave Sansa to hold Winterfell, and take the fight to the White Walkers in a way no one had tried before, by wearing the face of death itself. Wait, what? Just think about that. Jon Snow, not hiding from men, but from monsters. No open charge, no flaming sword, just slipping into their ranks like a ghost. The journey to the wall was silent and brutal. Snow blinded the road, and more than once they found frozen corpses half buried in drifts, their eyes pale and unblinking. By the time they reached Castle Black, the brothers of the Night's Watch could barely recognize Jon. And when he told them his plan, half thought it madness, half thought it blasphemy. That night, in the shadows of the Lord Commander's chamber, Arya handed him a face. It was cold to the touch, the skin pale, lips blue. It won't last long, she warned. The magic in them is older than ours. The moment they know you're not one of them, they'll all know. Jon didn't waste words. He pressed the face to his own, felt it melt into him like ice sinking into his bones. When he looked in the mirror, a dead man stared back. Crossing into the army of the dead was like stepping into a nightmare. They moved in silence, their bodies jerking and swaying, but their eyes, those burning blue eyes, fixed on the horizon, never blinking. Jon walked among them, his heart pounding so loud he thought it would give him away. The Night King rode at the center, silent and still as carved ice. For hours, Jon moved with them, counting numbers, spotting whites carrying weapons of dragonglass, noting the locations of the giants in their ranks. Every step brought him closer to the truth. This wasn't just an army. It was a flood, and when it reached the walls of the living, nothing would hold. Okay, pause. This is where the tension spikes. Because Jon isn't just risking his life. He's risking the North's only advantage. If he's caught here, there's no second chance. Just before dawn, he saw it. Something in the distance, dark against the snow. An entire column of the dead, dragging chains thicker than a man's waist. Whatever they were meant to pull. Jon didn't wait to find out. He slipped away, one slow, jerking step at a time, until the wind swallowed the sound of the dead. When he returned to Castle Black, The face slid from his skin like melting snow, and Arya caught him before he fell. "They're bringing something south," he said. "Something big." And in King's Landing, far from the frozen horror, Cersei Lannister was already scheming. The legend of the ghost had reached her ears again, and this time she wanted him dead or wearing her enemies' faces. The snows in the north never stopped, but now the air carried something heavier than winter, war on two fronts. Jon's infiltration had given the living their first clear picture of the dead's strength, but also revealed a truth more terrifying than the numbers. The chains. Whatever the Night King was bringing south, it wasn't just for destruction. It was for domination. Sansa called banners to Winterfell, her voice sharper than ever. "We cannot wait for them to reach us," she told the assembled lords. But even as she spoke, a raven from the south arrived, sealed in gold and crimson. Cersei Lannister invited the northern ghosts to parley in King's Landing. It wasn't just an invitation. It was a trap. Here's where it gets crazy. Cersei was entirely wrong about Jon's abilities. If she could convince him to remove a few choice enemies for her, the throne would be hers without a single battle. But if she couldn't, well, there were other ways to remove problems. Against Sansa's advice, Jon agreed to go. "If she's plotting, better I know it now," he said. He didn't tell her the whole truth, that he planned to walk into the Red Keep wearing Jaime Lannister's face. Wait, what? Imagine Cersei sitting in the throne room, thinking her twin had returned, only to realize too late that it's Jon Snow standing inches from her. That's the level of insanity we're talking about here. The journey south was swift and silent. Arya rode with him, though neither spoke much. When they reached the city, the smells of salt, sweat, and blood filled Jon's lungs. Arya worked her craft in a dimly lit cellar, peeling the borrowed face from her satchel and pressing it into Jon's hands. When he walked into the throne room, every Lannister guard bowed without hesitation. Cersei's eyes lit with something dangerous. Relief, maybe, or the memory of a time before all the blood. "You came back," she breathed. Jon didn't answer. He stepped forward, slow and measured, until he stood at the foot of the Iron Throne. And then the bells rang. Not for him, not for her, but for war. Outside the city, an army of the dead had reached the Blackwater. The Night King had moved faster than anyone expected, and now the walls of King's Landing were all that stood between the capital and annihilation. Cersei's smile faltered as the first white shapes appeared on the horizon. Jon tore the face away. Gasps filled the room. "You want to live?" he said. "Then fight with the North." Here's where the tension snaps. The Night King didn't just come for destruction. The chains Jon had seen before were dragging something monstrous from the river. The corpse of a dragon, its eyes burning blue. Viserion. King's Landing erupted into chaos. Gold cloaks fled. The dead scaled the walls faster than arrows could cut them down. Jon moved through the city like a blade through cloth, striking whites down, clearing paths for the living to escape. And somewhere above it all, the Night King watched him, recognizing, maybe, that this was no ordinary man. In the heart of the Red Keep, Cersei refused to flee. "The throne is mine," she hissed, even as the walls shook. Jon didn't waste time arguing. He knocked her aside as a section of ceiling collapsed, dragging her to safety against her will. The streets became rivers of blood and snow. Arya fought beside him, her daggers flashing in the firelight, but the dead kept coming, faster than they could fall. Jon knew they couldn't win here, not without the dragon on their side. So he made the only choice left. He ran straight into the tide of whites, cutting a path toward the Night King himself. Every strike brought him closer, every heartbeat louder in his ears. The Night King raised a spear, cold and perfect. Jon's sword met it in a shower of ice and steel. And just as the clash rang out, Viserion's blue fire roared toward them both. The blue fire swallowed everything, heatless, yet it burned through the air like frozen lightning. Jon hit the ground, rolling behind the shattered remains of a stone wall as the blast ripped through the street. Ice spread where it touched, devouring stone, freezing men mid-scream. When the roar faded, the Night King still stood, untouched. Viserion circled above, his wings beating the air into storms. Jon's heart hammered in his chest. He had one chance. Arya appeared out of nowhere, darting through the smoke like a shadow given flesh. She didn't look at Jon, didn't need to. Her eyes were fixed on the Night King. In her hand, the dagger of Valyrian steel gleamed like a shard of winter sunlight. Jon realized her plan an instant before she moved. But the Night King was ready this time. His hand shot out, catching her wrist. Ice spread across her arm in seconds. Her face twisted in pain. Jon lunged, slamming Longclaw against the Night King's weapon, forcing him to release her. The three of them locked together. Steel, ice, and fireless flames swirling in the chaos. Here's where it gets insane. The Night King wasn't trying to kill Jon. Not yet. His eyes were locked on him with something else entirely. Recognition. As if he could see beneath the skin, beneath the faces, into the shadow of no one. Wait, what? What if the magic of the Faceless men wasn't just for the living? What if the Night King knew it and had used it before? The thought rattled Jon, but there was no time. Viserion screams split the air again. Jon shoved Arya clear, rolling away just as the dragon fire obliterated the ground between them. Ice shards tore his skin, the cold so deep it felt like it was carving his bones. In the chaos, he saw it, a chain, dragging something massive through the gates of the Red Keep. The dead weren't here to take the city. They were here to claim the throne itself. The Iron Throne's jagged silhouette rose behind the advancing whites, and Jon understood. This wasn't conquest. This was coronation. The living broke. Gold cloaks, peasants, even some knights fled toward the river. Only a handful stood their ground. Arya, Jaime Lannister bleeding from a wound in his side, and Jon, face stripped bare, eyes locked on the Night King. Jon knew they couldn't win. Not today. "Fall back!" he shouted, shoving Arya toward the retreat. She didn't want to go, but the look in his eyes made her obey. Jaime followed, half-dragged, cursing every step. Jon stayed until the last possible moment, cutting down any white that got close enough to reach the retreating line. And then, with the city collapsing around him, he vanished, not into the snow, not into the dead, but into another face. When the survivors reached the ships in Blackwater Bay, Jon was nowhere to be found. Sansa's face turned to steel when she heard. "If he's alive," she said, "he's already planning the next move." And far to the north, beyond the wall, a lone figure walked through the snow, its face shifting with every step. No one knew if it was Jon Snow, or no one at all. The war wasn't over. It had just gone faceless.